The once wealthy but now bankrupt man allowed the young homeless boy to stay overnight in his restaurant. At sunrise, he was stunned and frozen in disbelief by what the boy had done to the place. A story of courage, compassion, and the harshness of the world is waiting for you to discover. Please subscribe to the channel and continue watching the video so you don't miss the next content. Henry left the meeting with the bankers, his steps slow and heavy, eyes glued to the pavement. Every word he just heard replayed in his mind like an unshakable verdict. The decision felt final. He was going to have to sell the restaurant, his mother's last gift to him, the only connection he still had to her. He gripped his document folder tightly, anger and frustration making his hands tense, as if holding on to the paper could somehow undo the looming bankruptcy. "Mum, I promised to keep this going. I promised you. And now, I'm failing," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper, hoarse with guilt. The sounds of the bustling city around him faded, blocked out by the whirlwind of his thoughts. Every step he took echoed with memories, empty scenes of the kitchen, where he and his mother once worked side by side, each recipe infused with her love and care. Now, it all felt unreachable, like a distant memory slipping away. How did it come to this? How did I let it fall apart without seeing it coming? He was in a state of confusion and despair. He stopped on the sidewalk, glancing up at the overcast sky, hoping for some sign or answer. Suddenly, a commotion broke through his thoughts. Across the street, a group of street vendors had surrounded a young boy, shouting and shoving him. "Thief! Think you can just steal and get away with it?" one of the men yelled, raising his fist as if ready to strike. The boy, clearly terrified, hunched over defensively, pleading, "I swear I didn't take anything. Please, I didn't do anything." His voice wavered, eyes wide with fear. Henry stepped forward decisively, positioning himself between the boy and the men. He raised a hand to calm the crowd, his expression resolute. "Is this really how you treat a kid? Are you sure about what you're saying?" Henry's voice was calm but firm, carrying an undertone of challenge. The men hesitated, exchanging uncertain looks, but one of them scowled and replied with hostility, "That kid's a troublemaker. We've seen him hanging around the booths. He's always around when we're not looking." Henry's gaze narrowed, a flicker of anger in his eyes. "And do you have proof? Or is this just another assumption based on nothing?" he asked, before turning his attention to the boy, who was now trembling. He saw the fear and desperation written all over the kid's face. "Come on, let's get out of here and find somewhere you can eat in peace." The boy's wary gaze lingered on him, uncertain, but there was something in Henry's eyes that made him feel just a bit safer. "Do you really want to help me?" he asked, his voice edged with doubt, as though expecting it might all be a trick. "Yes, I do," Henry responded, an encouraging smile crossing his face. "Sometimes, all a person needs is a chance." When they arrived at the restaurant, Henry carefully opened the door, feeling the weight of the gesture in a place that meant so much to him. The boy stepped inside hesitantly, taking in the unfamiliar setting. The dining area was simple yet inviting, with wooden tables and warm lighting that gave it a homey feel. However, a few customers gave the boy disapproving looks as he entered, as if they didn't think he belonged in a place where the wealthy frequented. Gerald, a sharply dressed man with a smirk, made his disdain clear, his voice cutting across the room. This place was already going downhill, and now it's turning into a shelter for the homeless. "Where's this place headed?" he sneered. The coldness in Gerald's voice made Henry's blood simmer, but he remained calm. Approaching the table where Elijah sat, he made a point to ignore Gerald's harsh remarks. "This is still my restaurant, and I choose who I welcome here," Henry said, looking Gerald straight in the eyes with a firm resolve that silenced the room. Willie, the restaurant's only server, had watched the scene unfold. He walked over to Elijah, offering a warm smile as he handed him a glass of water. "Don't let it get to you, kid. Some folks talk too much and feel too little," Willie whispered, glancing subtly in Gerald's direction. Elijah accepted the glass with shaky hands, his expression a mix of fear and gratitude. "Thank you. I'm not used to people being kind to me," he murmured, his voice barely audible. Willie gave him a reassuring nod and replied with a gentle smile. "Sometimes, all anyone needs is a chance. You can be yourself here." As the dining room hummed with whispers and curious glances, Henry made his way toward the kitchen, sensing the unease in the air. Every dish he crafted was imbued with his mother's teachings, lessons of kindness and generosity that had shaped him. While washing his hands, his mind drifted back to those early days, watching his mother as she introduced him to his first recipes. "Food is love, Henry. Each dish you make should carry a piece of your heart," she would often say, words that echoed within him now as he worked. Henry returned to the dining area after plating Elijah's meal, catching Gerald's sharp gaze, a faint smirk still plastered on Gerald's face. As Willie moved around, serving tables, Gerald's eyes tracked his every step, as if waiting for just the right moment to cause trouble. The room's gentle chatter served as a quiet backdrop, but the tension between Gerald and Willie was thick and unavoidable. Finally, with a calculated move, Gerald reached out, accidentally knocking over his drink and splashing it onto Elijah. The young man flinched, drenched, and looked to Willie for an explanation. "Is this what passes for service here?" "What a joke," Gerald sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Willie held himself back, resisting the urge to confront Gerald head-on. "Sir, I didn't touch your glass. You bumped it on purpose." "I saw it," Willie replied, attempting to keep his cool, though his voice showed hints of frustration. The other patrons turned their attention to the commotion, exchanging whispers. Gerald, maintaining his smug demeanor, shot back. "Are you calling me a liar? Is this how you treat customers? No wonder this place is going downhill. It's a disgrace." The insult, aimed both at Willie and Henry's restaurant, stirred an anger in Willie that he fought to contain. "Respect works both ways, sir. We're here to serve, not to be disrespected," he responded, feeling the situation slipping from his control. The argument escalated rapidly as Gerald began knocking items off the table, his gestures becoming more dramatic while he kept up his taunting tone. "Well, isn't that something? A waiter who thinks he can call the shots," Gerald sneered, his voice sharp as he swiped his arm across the table, sending plates and silverware crashing to the floor with a loud clang. Heads turned, and all eyes landed on Willie, who fought to keep his composure as he knelt to gather the fallen pieces, his patience fraying. "You can say whatever you want, but it doesn't change the fact that you're the one who caused all this," Willie replied, his voice steady but pained as he picked up a shattered plate. From across the room, Henry watched the scene, feeling the tension knot in his chest. He knew Gerald was stirring up trouble, but the potential backlash from customers put him in a tough spot. Willie's face showed a mix of frustration and sorrow as he attempted to salvage the moment. "Willie, that's enough. This has gone far enough," Henry finally intervened, his voice heavy with fatigue. Willie paused, clutching the pieces of the broken plate, and looked up at Henry with a pleading gaze. "But Henry, I didn't start this. He provoked everything," Willie tried to explain, but Henry's decision was already set. Henry let out a deep sigh, casting his eyes downward as if he couldn't bear the injustice of what he was about to do. "Willie, I'm sorry, but I have to think about the customers and the reputation of the restaurant." "Please, collect your things," he said, his voice strained yet resolute. For a moment, Willie stood still, trying to process the weight of the moment, the sense of betrayal and loss sinking in. It felt like the ground was falling away beneath him, the situation almost too surreal to grasp. "Henry, I always gave everything I had here," he whispered, his voice laced with heartache. Gradually, the diners dispersed, leaving the restaurant in a heavy silence. Elijah, who had seen it all, looked at Henry with a mix of sadness and disbelief. He couldn't understand how someone as dedicated as Willie could be treated so unjustly. As Henry locked up for the night, Elijah approached him quietly, his gaze troubled. "Mr. Henry, why did he have to go?" "He didn't do anything wrong," Elijah murmured, his voice barely a whisper as his eyes began to fill with tears. Henry took a deep breath, uncertain of how to respond. "Elijah, sometimes life's just too tangled for us to make sense of it all," he said, attempting to mask his own sorrow. Noticing the lost expression on Elijah's face, Henry felt a pull in his heart and decided to offer a place for the night. "Look, kid, this place might not be much, but it's a lot safer than the streets. Why don't you stay here tonight?" Elijah's eyes widened at the unexpected offer, a mix of gratitude and uncertainty flashing across his face. I don't know what to say. No one's ever done that for me before," he admitted, his voice carrying the weight of someone unaccustomed to kindness. Henry placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, nodding. "I know what it feels like to feel lost. Sometimes all we need is a place that feels like our own, even if just for one night." His tone softened, revealing hints of his own loneliness. As Elijah settled into a corner of the restaurant, his mind drifted back to Willie. The thought of the kind waiter, cast aside by an unfair situation, stirred a fresh ache in him. Why is it that good people always end up paying for things they didn't do, he wondered, a pang of unfamiliar sorrow gnawing at him. The restaurant lay quiet, and in that silence, Elijah pondered the little he knew of Willie's life. It was clear that Willie faced his own share of struggles, yet he always seemed to treat others with warmth. Will I ever meet someone like him again, Elijah thought, a hollow ache settling in his chest. Later that evening, the restaurant door creaked open. Willie, visibly shaken, came to collect his belongings. He paused upon seeing Elijah in the corner, his head bowed, lost in thought. Offering a faint smile despite his sadness, Willie greeted him, "Still awake, huh?" His feeble attempt at a cheery tone was melancholy. Elijah looked up, and upon seeing Willie, felt an urge to express what was on his mind. "It wasn't right what they did to you, Willie. You didn't deserve that," he said firmly, meeting Willie's gaze. Willie, moved by the boy's words, sat down beside him, releasing a deep sigh. "Thank you, Elijah. But you know, life doesn't always play fair, and sometimes we just can't get the truth across," Willie said, his gaze distant, lost in thoughts of times past. "Believe me, I've been where you are now, with hardly anything to lean on." He paused, then continued. "Henry was there for me when I had nothing. All I want now is to repay his kindness." Elijah felt the weight of Willie's words, each syllable carrying echoes of his struggles. With a renewed resolve shining in his eyes, Elijah stood up, scanning the messy restaurant. "Maybe we can clean this place up," he suggested, with a glimmer of hope. Willie gave a small, surprised smile at Elijah's idea. "You've got more courage than most adults, Elijah," he said warmly. "You're absolutely right. Let's do it. At least this way. Henry will know he has someone on his side." Together, they began picking up broken glass and setting tables straight. It was more than a cleanup. It was like piecing together fragments of their own hopes. The next morning, Henry arrived at the restaurant, his steps heavy with worry. He stopped outside, his reflection staring back at him from the worn glass door, a reminder of how much his heart weighed from the night before. His mother had poured her soul into this place, and seeing it fall apart hurt more deeply with every day that passed. Before entering, he paused to look at an old picture of her hanging by the entrance. He reached out, fingers trembling as he touched the frame. A single tear slipped down his cheek before he could stop it. "Mum, I wish you could see this." "Or maybe it's better you don't," he whispered, fighting the wave of sadness. When he finally opened the door, he froze in shock. Instead of the chaos he expected, the restaurant was spotless. The tables were set, the chairs neatly arranged, and the floor sparkled as though untouched by the previous night's disaster. He wandered through the room, each step filling him with wonder and gratitude. Who could have done this? The sound of movement in the kitchen distracted him from his thoughts. Willie and Elijah stood nearby, chatting quietly as they finished putting away the last of the dishes. When they noticed Henry, they stopped and shared a slightly hesitant look. Willie broke the silence, his voice steady, but carrying a hint of nerves. "Henry, we thought you might need some help. Hope it's all right that we went ahead," he said with a gentle smile. Henry stared at them, speechless, first at Willie, then at Elijah, who was now looking back at him with a flicker of hope in his gaze. You did this for me? Even after everything?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Willie stepped forward, resting a hand on Henry's shoulder, and with rare sincerity replied, "No matter what happens, Henry, this restaurant is part of me too. This place, it's where I found a home, and I believe it's meant something to Elijah here as well." Elijah, still a bit shy, softly added, "I wanted to help. Just so you know, you can count on me too." The heartfelt honesty in their words moved Henry profoundly, and he couldn't hold back his tears. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice filled with gratitude. Pulling them both into a warm embrace, he felt a bond forming, one that reached beyond just work or appreciation. The sound of firm footsteps from outside broke the silence in the restaurant. A woman with a strict bearing, Beverly, entered, her professional gaze surveying the room. With her notepad in hand and a clear air of authority, she commanded attention. Henry quickly collected himself, wiping his eyes and stepping toward her. "Good morning, can I help you?" he asked, working to keep his nerves in check. Without looking up from her notes, Beverly's sharp eyes scanned the restaurant from the tables to the counter. "I'm a health inspector, here for a routine inspection." Henry nodded, doing his best to stay calm despite the worry creeping in. He knew the restaurant's condition wasn't ideal, and he feared that even minor issues could spell trouble. "Of course, go right ahead. We're here to help with whatever you need," he replied, trying to sound reassuring. Beverly continued her thorough inspection, taking in each detail with a critical eye. As she walked past Willie and Elijah, who were both watching everything carefully, her gentle gaze briefly met Willie's, and for a fleeting moment, she seemed to relax a little. "You seem to take good care of the place. Although there are some things here that could use a bit of fine-tuning," she commented, pointing to a few minor areas. Noticing Beverly's slight softening, Willie took a chance and gave her a small smile. "We do our best, Mom. This place means more to us than just a job," he said, surprising Beverly with the honesty in his voice. She paused, studying Willie's face as though she could see something deeper there. "It's rare to find someone who's that dedicated. I hope you keep it up, because things aren't always as straightforward as they look," she replied, her voice a touch softer now. Henry was observing the whole exchange, grateful to have Willie there to help ease the situation. However, when Beverly looked over the restaurant's records, her face changed as she noticed something unusual. Her brow furrowed, and she turned to Henry with a firm tone once again. "There's an issue here, sir. These documents, they're outdated," she noted, holding the stack of papers with a serious expression. Henry felt a pang of worry. "Oh yes, of course, ma'am. I'll handle that right away," he responded, his voice masking his rising concern. "We're working with limited resources, but I'll find a way." That morning, as Beverly finished her inspection, Willie took a break to discuss something important with her about the young boy with him. Taking a deep breath, he began, knowing it was a sensitive topic. "Beverly, I need to be upfront with you about Elijah," he said, his tone somber. "He doesn't have anyone. He's been on the streets for a while, and this restaurant has been the only place where he's found some stability." Realizing it was a risk to bring this up, he pressed on. "Is there any way to help him legally?" Beverly, who had been so firm, looked at Willie with a mixture of surprise and empathy. She considered his words, and her sternness softened slightly. "Willie, I understand you want to look out for him," she replied, her voice showing a hint of warmth. "But it's complicated. He's undocumented, which would make it tough to help him formally." She paused, glancing thoughtfully at Elijah. "Maybe I can find a lawyer to help him." The thought gave Willie a glimmer of relief, though he knew the real battle was only beginning. He looked at her, gratitude evident in his eyes. "Beverly, if you can do anything at all." "He deserves this shot," he said, his voice layered with a quiet plea. "I promised I'd do everything I could to make sure he has a chance for a better life." Meanwhile, Henry was at yet another bank, seeking a loan to stabilize his finances. Sitting in the waiting area, he mentally rehearsed his pitch, knowing each word needed to reflect confidence. But thoughts of his mother and the day they'd launched their restaurant kept resurfacing, a silent comfort. He remembered her beaming as she cut the ribbon, saying, "This place will be our fresh start, Henry." That memory, her hopeful smile, pushed him to keep trying. When the bank manager finally called him in, Henry steeled himself, speaking as confidently as he could about his plans. The manager listened, but his detached expression hinted at an unfavorable answer. "I see where you're coming from, sir, but given your restaurant's recent struggles, the risk is substantial," the manager said, his refusal unvarnished. Henry understood the implications, but pressed on, almost desperately. "I understand, but this place was built on sacrifices. All I need is a shot to turn things around," he pleaded. But the manager's response was simple. "I'm sorry, sir." Disheartened, Henry left, feeling the weight of yet another rejection, when he spotted someone familiar outside. Gerald was waiting, as though he anticipated Henry's disappointment. "You know, Henry," he sneered, "if I were you, I'd have let this restaurant go ages ago." His tone was coated in mock sympathy that barely masked his disdain. Henry, tired of the relentless pressure, just stared back, unyielding. Gerald, with a smug grin, patted him on the back. "Sometimes knowing when to quit is what keeps failure from becoming a full-blown disgrace," he remarked. Returning to the restaurant, Henry found Elijah in the kitchen, eager to help with some basic tasks. Watching the young boy try his hand at the work brought Henry a brief moment of relief. He'd always valued hard work. But in his concentration, Elijah fumbled, and an expensive plate slipped from his hands, shattering on the floor. The crash filled the kitchen, and panic flashed across Elijah's face. "Henry, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to help," Elijah murmured, his voice shaking with guilt. Henry watched the young boy closely, noticing the worry in his eyes. He knelt down, bringing himself to Elijah's level. "Hey, don't worry about it. Things like this happen. Breaking a plate doesn't change a thing about how I feel," Henry said gently, his tone calm and reassuring. Elijah, still blinking back tears, looked up at Henry, a mixture of hope and disbelief flashing across his face. You're not going to send me away?" he asked hesitantly, as if unsure that someone would actually offer him another chance. Henry smiled, reaching out to tousle Elijah's hair, a silent gesture of reassurance. "Of course not. Everyone has a place here, especially those who are ready to learn," he replied firmly, and Elijah's eyes lit up with renewed confidence. With a soft chuckle, Henry added, "Now, let's clean up this mess, and then I'll show you a special recipe, something my mum passed down to me, something that captures what family's really about." Meanwhile, Gerald was plotting to destroy Henry's restaurant for good. During an informal meeting with other local business owners, he leaned in, putting on an air of secrecy as he began to spread rumors, masking his true motives with a practiced tone. "Henry's restaurant is in terrible shape," he said, his voice low, as though confiding a secret. "That place is a health hazard, especially as it stands now, and you all know how vital it is to maintain our reputations." His words held a subtle threat that the others recognized. Around the table, a few business owners exchanged uncertain looks, though some nodded, already leaning toward belief. When one appeared ready to question him, Gerald cut him off, shaking his head with a forced smile. "Look, I know you've known Henry a long time and probably care enough to let that cloud your judgment. But times change, and so do people." He paused for effect, letting the words sink in. "His situation is deteriorating, and it's only a matter of time before the restaurant follows suit. I've seen the disorder there myself," he added dramatically, allowing the statement to linger. Someone needed to step in before things went too far. After the meeting ended and the business associates appeared convinced, Gerald made his way to a nearby phone booth. His hands were steady as he punched in the number of a contact in the health department. Carefully adjusting his tone to sound anonymous, yet concerned, he began his call. "I'd like to report a serious health violation. Henry's restaurant is in awful condition. Honestly, I don't even know how it's still open," he said, each word dripping with an exaggerated sense of alarm. "It's a risk to any customer who steps inside. You need to send an inspector before it's too late." He hung up, satisfied, certain that this would create real problems for Henry. When Beverly received the complaint, her heart sank. She knew she had to look into it, but her budding relationships with both Willie and Henry made the situation feel complicated. As she read through the complaint's details, the accusations struck her as oddly specific, as if someone were intentionally trying to bring down the restaurant. Why would anyone do that, she wondered, feeling the tension between her professional duty and a nagging suspicion. "I have to check this out, but something doesn't feel right about this complaint," she thought. Arriving at the restaurant, she saw Willie busy serving customers, but he immediately noticed her serious expression. "Beverly, is something wrong?" he asked, looking at her with concern. Beverly took a deep breath and nodded, meeting his gaze. "We received a complaint about the health standards here. I need to do another inspection. I'm really sorry about this, Willie. I hope you understand," she said, her voice a mix of apology and professionalism. Willie tried to mask his disappointment, but nodded. "Of course, Beverly. Do what you need to do. We have nothing to hide." Beverly began the inspection, scrutinizing every corner of the kitchen, inspecting the equipment, checking the supplies, and paying attention to the smallest details, like how the food was stored. But as she continued, it became increasingly obvious that the complaints had been exaggerated. "None of this matches what was in the complaint," she murmured, making notes. After a while, she looked back at Willie, her gaze softer. "This complaint, it doesn't add up. It seems like someone went out of their way to try and cause you trouble." Willie studied Beverly's face, noticing the resolve and compassion reflected in her eyes. "Thanks for being fair about this, Beverly," he said earnestly. "This restaurant isn't just a job for us. It's our home. We've put everything into keeping it running." Beverly nodded, understanding the deep connection the restaurant held for both Willie and Henry. "I get it. I'll make sure to look into these issues, And who knows, maybe we can trace back where this complaint is coming from. As she left, Henry's chest tightened with the realization that his troubles were far from over. Later that day, as he tried to access his bank account to purchase supplies, he was met with a blocked message. He tried again, but the system kept denying him access. Panic setting in, he called the bank, only to learn his accounts were frozen due to unresolved debts. "This can't be happening. Not now," he murmured, feeling the weight of desperation settle over him. Elijah, nearby and noticing Henry's distress, couldn't stand by without helping. Approaching him, Elijah held out a small pouch and looked at Henry with sincerity. "I know it's not much, but I've saved a little. Maybe it can help," he said, offering what he had. "Just some coins and a few dollar bills." The gesture left Henry with a lump in his throat. That evening, after closing, Willie and Beverly met at a nearby cafe. The quiet setting was perfect for the talk they needed to have about Elijah. Willie looked at Beverly with worry, knowing that her insight could change the boy's future. Taking a deep breath, he asked, "Beverly, what do we need to do to give him real security? I don't just mean shelter. I want him to have a home," he added, his voice heavy with concern. Beverly took a moment, sensing the gravity of what she was about to say. "Willie, it's not easy," she began, carefully. "For someone like Elijah, without proper documentation, the first step is to find a legal guardian, someone willing to take on that responsibility." She paused, gauging his response, then continued, "That means meeting a lot of requirements, showing stability, and most importantly, commitment." Willie's expression grew more determined as he nodded. Willie looked at Beverly, a hint of determination in his eyes. "He's already faced so much hardship, Beverly. If there's any way I can give him a safe place to land, I'll do whatever I have to." The warmth in his voice brought a glint of admiration to Beverly's gaze. Her pulse quickened as she realized the depth of Willie's commitment to Elijah. "This is a big step, Willie," she replied softly, "but I know you're the kind of person who won't shy away from a responsibility like that." Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken understanding between them filling the quiet. They both sensed the subtle shift in their relationship over recent weeks, but before either could say more, Beverly's phone buzzed, pulling them back to reality. "Sorry, duty calls," she muttered, breaking eye contact. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Elijah had drifted off in a corner of the kitchen, but it wasn't a restful sleep. A while later, Henry spotted him, breathing heavily and sweating, tangled in a nightmare. Gently, Henry placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder until the boy jolted awake, disoriented. "It's okay, Elijah," Henry said softly. "Just a dream." I dreamed I was back on the streets," Elijah whispered, his voice trembling, his eyes shiny with unshed tears. Henry nodded with quiet empathy. "I get it, kid. My life hasn't always been easy either," he admitted, his gaze going distant. "I lost my parents young and had to learn how to survive on my own. But I found strength in places I didn't expect, just like you found something here." Elijah looked at him and was astounded by their connection. "You know," Henry added, "sometimes the hardest times lead us to family in the most unexpected places." He hugged Elijah, the two finding comfort in their shared warmth. It was still dawn when a sudden clamor erupted outside the restaurant. A group was approaching for an unannounced inspection under the leadership of Beverly's supervisors. Henry's stomach dropped as he recognized them, recalling recent issues. Elijah, sensing the tension, glanced up at Henry, anxiety in his eyes. "What's happening?" he whispered, unsure. Henry leaned in, his voice steady. "Just stay calm, Elijah. We'll handle this together." Catching sight of Henry's expression, Beverly, who was part of the team, decided to step in, hoping to ease the tension she could feel building. She understood that if the team found any signs that Elijah was staying there, things could get messy fast. We have to be cautious, she thought, subtly steering the inspection team away from areas where Elijah might be hiding. Catching on to her plan, Willie leaned over and whispered to Elijah, motioning toward the kitchen. "Stay low and quiet, kid. They can't see you here now," he reassured, hoping to calm the boy. As the inspectors examined every corner of the restaurant, Beverly skillfully diverted their attention whenever possible, keeping an eye on where Willie and Elijah had tucked themselves away. But despite her careful maneuvers, one inspector began moving towards the kitchen where Elijah was. Spotting this, Beverly swiftly stepped in. "The kitchen's already been checked. No need to go over it again," she stated confidently, hoping to keep Elijah safe. The inspector paused briefly, then decided to follow her lead, backing off from the kitchen. After what felt like an eternity, the inspection finally wrapped up, and the team prepared to leave. Henry let out a deep sigh of relief, and Willie and Elijah slowly came out from their hiding spots, still tense but grateful to have gone unnoticed. Before she left, Beverly quietly approached Henry. "I found something that could be a game-changer for you and the restaurant," she said in a low voice. "There's a loophole in the law that might help you handle Elijah's situation without any issues." Henry looked at her with gratitude and surprise as she continued, "I'll need a few days to pull everything together, but I think this could really make a difference for you." Henry nodded, feeling a renewed sense of hope stir inside him. That afternoon, Beverly started digging into Gerald's background, driven by a growing suspicion that he was behind the complaints against Henry's restaurant. She examined inspection records and spotted a pattern of similar issues cropping up in other places, tied to Gerald's business rivals. "These problems aren't coincidences," she muttered, her face hardening as she reviewed the evidence on her computer. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became. Gerald had been manipulating reports and alliances to drive his competitors out of business. Beverly took a deep breath, a knot of ethical doubt tightening in her mind. "I could use this information, but is that the right thing to do?" Despite her hesitation, she knew that exposing Gerald's tactics could protect Henry and shield other honest business owners from harm. "Gerald wouldn't hesitate to take down anyone standing in his way," she whispered, justifying her decision. The choice was risky, but thinking of Elijah's future and Henry's hard work, she resolved it was worth it. Sometimes doing the right thing means stepping into risky territory. This thought echoed in her mind as she shut down her computer, preparing to leave the office. As Beverly stepped outside, a chill ran down her spine. She sensed someone was watching her. Casting a subtle glance around, she noticed a car parked a little way off, a shadowy figure seated inside. Her pulse quickened as she picked up her pace, working hard to keep her calm. Could Gerald already know what I'm up to? The question echoed in her mind, her heart pounding. With each step, she felt the weight of the situation pressing down. I have to stay alert. The last thing I need is to slip up. Later that evening, the restaurant was unusually calm, giving Willie and Elijah time to tidy up the dining area. During a quiet moment, Willie found himself watching Beverly from across the room, feeling an unexpected shift. It wasn't just gratitude for her support, it went deeper than that. "How did this even happen?" he murmured, caught up in his thoughts as he observed her quietly organizing her files. Elijah, noticing the look on Willie's face, decided to make a move, flashing a sly grin. "Why don't you talk to her? She always lights up when she's around you." Willie chuckled, trying to hide his unease. "It's not like that, Elijah. She's got her work and I'm, well, just the waiter here." But inside, he knew his feelings had already crossed a line. Unfazed, Elijah took Beverly by the arm and brought her over to Willie. "You both are always so busy. Take a moment to chat," he suggested innocently, bringing out a round of embarrassed laughter from both adults. "Elijah, you didn't have to do that," Willie said, giving him a grateful but awkward look. Beverly, noticing Willie's discomfort, offered a warm smile and broke the ice. "You know, Willie, ever since I started on this case, I felt a sense of connection here. Maybe it's the challenges you're all facing. It's inspiring." Willie's heart sped up, and he answered softly, "Beverly, you bring hope into this place, more than you might realize." The two exchanged a silent gaze, the space between them shrinking, a shared moment building slowly. But just then, the restaurant door swung open and Gerald strode in, smirking. "Sorry to barge in, but I can see it's cozy in here," he remarked, instantly breaking the tension. Meanwhile, back in the restaurant's office, Henry was combing through old documents, hoping to find something that might help him save the place. Buried in a pile of papers, he unearthed a worn, yellowed folder filled with financial and legal records that looked untouched for years. When he opened it, he realized they were the original documents from when his mother first opened the restaurant. "These might actually mean something," he murmured, carefully scanning each page. As he sifted through, he found a detailed contract about the restaurant's land, revealing clauses that he could potentially use to his advantage. The further he read, the more Henry understood. The restaurant's financial struggles were tied to an old feud with Gerald's family. It turns out his mother had bought the land on specific terms that Gerald and his associates were now trying to overturn to reclaim ownership. "So that's his game. Gerald's trying to erase my mum's legacy to take back what he thinks belongs to him," Henry muttered, his pulse quickening as the betrayal's weight sank in. An overwhelming mix of anger and sadness welled up, threatening to overtake him. He focused on the contract's fine print, but his chest tightened, his breath growing shallow. "This can't be happening," he whispered, his voice cracking. After all the sacrifices his mother made to keep this place alive. He tried to stand but felt weak, the air thick and his vision clouding. "I have to act fast, before it's too late." Struggling to compose himself, Henry was still reeling from the shock while Gerald put his scheme in motion. On a quiet night, Gerald slipped into the restaurant, moving with the meticulousness of someone whose plan was already in motion. He planted counterfeit documents in key areas, muttering, "No one will ever know," as a smug grin crossed his face. He scattered fake health reports and inspection papers marked with invented violations, all meant to sway inspectors into deeming the restaurant unsanitary. As he left, he made a call to a contact at a regulatory agency, using his persuasive charm to make his case sound urgent and damning. "Listen, I'm just trying to make sure people stay safe, you know?" Gerald's voice carried a fake tone of concern. "I've seen things at that place that no one should ever have to see." The inspector on the other end of the call paused, hesitating, but eventually gave in to Gerald's insistence. If they're serious about public safety, they need to pull her off this case. "Beverly's too involved with them to keep a clear perspective," Gerald added, grinning as he got the response he wanted. Things are finally falling into place, he thought. The next morning, Beverly opened an official letter notifying her of her suspension from the case. The document, cloaked in bureaucratic language about impartiality and professionalism, read more like a critique than an explanation. The deeper she read, the more her disbelief and frustration grew. Beverly pressed her lips together, holding back her emotions. "I've done nothing but my job. If they want real justice, they'll listen to what I found," she muttered, her voice edged with resolve. But her words fell on deaf ears, and she left the office feeling deeply disillusioned, her mind swirling with the unfairness of it all. Gerald's pulling the strings, and they're falling right into his trap, she thought bitterly. Even though she was now off the case, Beverly couldn't bring herself to abandon Henry, Willie, and Elijah. This was about more than work. It was about standing up for what was right, and she wasn't going to walk away now. While Henry focused on his health, Willie had taken on the task of managing the restaurant. He put in extra hours without complaint, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Elijah pitched in as well, helping in the kitchen and keeping things organized. "You're doing a great job, Elijah. I'm glad I can count on you," Willie said with a smile, and Elijah beamed with pride. "Thanks, Willie. I want to give it my best. Henry would be proud to see the restaurant doing well." Back at work, Beverly was feeling the strain. Some co-workers were questioning her integrity, hinting she was too biased. She knew Gerald was orchestrating it all, but exposing his motives was becoming harder by the day. "If you keep siding with that restaurant, you might end up out of a job," one of her supervisors cautioned, his tone filled with warning. Beverly took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her heart was racing, but her resolve was firm. "Listen, I'm just trying to make sure people stay safe, you know." Gerald's voice carried a fake tone of concern. "I've seen things at that place that no one should ever have to see." The inspector on the other end of the call paused, hesitating, but eventually gave in to Gerald's insistence. If they're serious about public safety, they need to pull her off this case. "Beverly's too involved with them to keep a clear perspective," Gerald added, grinning as he got the response he wanted. Things are finally falling into place, he thought. The next morning, Beverly opened an official letter notifying her of her suspension from the case. The document, cloaked in bureaucratic language about impartiality and professionalism, read more like a critique than an explanation. The deeper she read, the more her disbelief and frustration grew. Beverly pressed her lips together, holding back her emotions. "I've done nothing but my job. If they want real justice, they'll listen to what I found," she muttered, her voice edged with resolve. But her words fell on deaf ears, and she left the office feeling deeply disillusioned, her mind swirling with the unfairness of it all. "Gerald's pulling the strings, and they're falling right into his trap," she thought bitterly. Even though she was now off the case, Beverly couldn't bring herself to abandon Henry, Willie, and Elijah. This was about more than work. It was about standing up for what was right, and she wasn't going to walk away now. While Henry focused on his health, Willie had taken on the task of managing the restaurant. He put in extra hours without complaint, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Elijah pitched in as well, helping in the kitchen and keeping things organized. "You're doing a great job, Elijah. I'm glad I can count on you," Willie said with a smile, and Elijah beamed with pride. "Thanks, Willie. I want to give it my best. Henry would be proud to see the restaurant doing well." Back at work, Beverly was feeling the strain. Some co-workers were questioning her integrity, hinting she was too biased. She knew Gerald was orchestrating it all, but exposing his motives was becoming harder by the day. "If you keep siding with that restaurant, you might end up out of a job," one of her supervisors cautioned, his tone filled with warning. Beverly took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her heart was racing, but her resolve was firm. Henry found himself in a tough spot, uncertain how to keep Elijah from ending up on the streets again. Beverly stood beside him, understanding the weight of Henry's plea. "Legally, it's going to be a process," she said. "We need proof that someone can provide him with consistent, stable care. You might even need to get custody so Elijah has a solid foundation." Henry paused, absorbing Beverly's advice. "If that's what he needs, I'm all in. I'll do whatever it takes to give Elijah a safe future. This restaurant is as much his home now as it is mine." Beverly nodded, respecting Henry's determination. "I'll guide you through each step, Henry. We'll begin with the paperwork and build a secure support system for Elijah," she said, trying to instill confidence in him. Meanwhile, Willie, who was tidying up the dining area after closing, overheard bits of their conversation. Henry's words echoed in his mind. Elijah deserves a secure future. A surge of emotion swept over Willie as he recognized Henry and Beverly's commitment to the boy. Despite all their challenges, he felt this was his true family. They're doing everything for him, he thought, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and pride. This place meant far more than just a paycheck. Across town, Gerald was in a dimly lit bar, hatching his own scheme. He was attempting to bribe city inspectors, offering a hefty sum to jeopardize Henry's restaurant with fake reports. "This restaurant is out of control," Gerald said in a low, calculated tone. "People are at risk, and it's time someone shuts it down. All I ask is that you do your job, and a bit more." The inspectors wavered, but Gerald's steely gaze and the money on the table were enough to sway them. Beverly, suspicious of Gerald's intentions, decided to tail one of the inspectors to catch him red-handed. Discreetly, she recorded their exchange, capturing every word and gesture on her phone. "Now we've got something on him," she muttered, satisfied with her evidence. Just then, as she tried to tuck her phone away, she spotted one of Gerald's henchmen watching her closely, noticing her every move. Beverly felt an icy shiver run through her. "He's on to me," she thought, as Gerald's loyal subordinate wasted no time notifying him of her presence. Fueled with rage, Gerald stormed over to confront her, intending to catch her off guard. He approached with a smirk that was all chill, his eyes harboring an unmistakable threat. "You're really playing with fire, Beverly. This isn't going to end well for you," he murmured, his voice dripping with malice. Holding her phone tightly, Beverly steadied herself, fighting off her fear. "The truth will always come out, Gerald, and I won't let you stop me from exposing who you really are," she said firmly. Gerald took a step closer, his voice lowering, but his threats becoming more pointed. "Do you really think anyone will believe you when I'm through with you? You're messing with forces you can't handle." Though shaken, Beverly inhaled deeply, refusing to back down despite the heavy price she sensed was looming. As Gerald continued to inch toward her, his presence felt like a silent menace. Despite her controlled tone, the tension between them was palpable. Just then, Willie appeared, having quietly followed to ensure her safety. Placing himself squarely between her and Gerald, his gaze was unyielding, a barrier of protection. "Gerald, if you touch her or threaten her again, you'll regret it," he declared, his voice deep with an intensity that caught Gerald off guard. Gerald's expression shifted from shock to disdain, sneering. "Well, look at that. A courageous waiter stepping in to save the day." His words dripped with mockery, his gaze locked onto Willie, but Willie didn't flinch. Stepping forward with a steady stance, his body braced and his resolve clear. "I've learned that standing up for those who deserve it is worth any risk," he replied calmly. "To you, life's just a game, but to us, it's everything." Beverly felt a rush of admiration as she witnessed Willie's bravery. Gerald's smugness faltered as he realized Willie wouldn't be easily intimidated. Backing off slightly, he cast one last, cutting look at Beverly. "This isn't over, Beverly. You really think a waiter can keep you safe forever?" he said, flashing a cold smile before stepping away. Willie kept his gaze fixed on Gerald until he finally walked away. Beverly, who was still in awe of Willie's audacious actions, let out a sigh of relief as soon as he disappeared. "Willie, I never knew you had it in you," she murmured, her voice low but full of admiration. The following day, while sorting through old paperwork in the restaurant's back office, Elijah stumbled upon a dusty box filled with old photos. Curious, he began flipping through them, images capturing the restaurant's history since it first opened. In one of the photos, he recognized a young Henry standing beside a woman he assumed was Henry's mother. But what really caught Elijah's attention was another familiar face in the background, Gerald, with that same smug expression he always wore. "So he's been around since the beginning," Elijah muttered, intrigued. He brought the photos over to Henry, who was busy in the kitchen preparing dishes. Henry paused when he saw the pictures, a heavy expression settling on his face. "These photos, they're a part of the past I've tried to move on from," he said with a sigh. Sensing the weight of the memory, Elijah hesitated before asking, "What really happened, Henry? Why was Gerald there when you opened?" Henry looked at Elijah, and after a moment of silence, decided to open up. "Gerald and I were friends once. He helped me at the start, but he got more focused on money than on our friendship. When my mother passed away, he tried to seize control of the restaurant, but I couldn't let him." The revelation lingered in the air, leaving Elijah surprised as he tried to grasp the depth of the story. "So, he's been after the restaurant from the start, and you've been fighting him all this time?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Henry nodded slowly, adding, "I've been trying to protect my mother's legacy, but Gerald's never let it go. And now, he's back to finish what he started. This restaurant is all I have left to honor her memory, Elijah." A few days later, Beverly was called in for a crucial meeting with health surveillance officials where she'd finally have a chance to present her case against Gerald. She arrived fully prepared, with all the documents and recordings neatly organized, but she was well aware that Gerald's connections could complicate things. As the meeting began, she presented each piece of evidence carefully, detailing the irregularities and Gerald's long-standing history of deceit. "Gentlemen, what we're dealing with here is a deliberate, systematic scheme of fraud and abuse of power." Beverly, with a steady, unshakable voice, pointed out how Gerald was using his power to target anyone he saw as a threat. The Health Surveillance Committee listened, though Beverly noticed a few members seemed hesitant, perhaps already under Gerald's sway. Yet she pressed on, saying, "The facts are clear, and it's our responsibility to make sure the truth shines through. This isn't just about one restaurant. It's about putting a stop to a pattern of wrongdoing," she emphasized, hoping to convey the gravity of the issue. But beneath her confidence, she worried that her words alone might not be enough. After a tense pause, one director spoke up, but to her frustration, he dismissed the evidence as too weak for any formal action. Gerald, seated casually in the corner, gave a smug smile, clearly secure in his untouchable position. "We appreciate your dedication, Beverly, but without stronger proof, we can't move forward with charges," the director said, barely glancing her way. Rage simmered within Beverly as she watched Gerald slip away from justice, realizing this was a setback she'd have to contend with for now. As the meeting ended, Gerald brushed past her, whispering just loud enough for her alone to hear, "I told you no one would believe you, Beverly. So who's getting burned now?" She stared back, feeling her anger fuse with a fierce resolve. In the days that followed her attempt to expose Gerald, a swell of community support surged for Henry's restaurant. Longtime patrons, loyal since his mother's time, returned, inspired to stand by him. The dining room buzzed with activity, and the renewed energy filled Henry with the sense that all his hard work was finally paying off. "This place feels more alive than ever," he murmured to himself, emotion glistening in his eyes as he took in the sight of full tables and animated conversations echoing across the room. A wave of gratitude and pride appeared to replace the hardships he had experienced. "Mum, this is for you," he whispered, feeling her legacy live on in the thriving restaurant. Willie, standing by Henry's side, smiled as he saw the look on his friend's face. "Seeing the restaurant like this, it's like stepping back into our happiest days," Willie said warmly. "Your mother would be so proud." Henry nodded, his eyes unfocused, caught in a tide of cherished memories. "It's more than just a restaurant, Willie. It's our story, and I'm thankful we've come this far together." Later, after the rush quieted down, the place was still, bathed in soft lighting over the dining area. Beverly and Willie were cleaning tables, exchanging quiet glances that spoke of all they had shared in that space. Willie came closer, his voice steady but deeply heartfelt. "Beverly, I feel like I've found more than I ever expected here," he said. "You're part of that now, you know." Beverly smiled, understanding the weight of his words, and before they could say more, Willie leaned in and kissed her, a moment charged with everything they felt. Elijah, watching secretly from behind the counter, couldn't help but grin in quiet satisfaction, his eyes twinkling with a mix of joy and surprise. He whispered to himself, chuckling softly. Just then, Henry walked in, catching a glimpse of them together. He paused, a small knowing smile on his face, though he chose to act as if he hadn't seen a thing. "Well, well, looks like work around here just got a whole lot more interesting," he teased, adding a light-hearted touch to the moment. As the restaurant flourished, Gerald's grip on power began to crumble. Old deceptions started coming to light, and former allies distanced themselves, unwilling to risk association. Alone, Gerald felt his fury build. "They've abandoned me, like I'm the only one responsible," he muttered, his eyes flashing with frustration. Betrayed but determined, he decided to aim one last attack at Henry's restaurant. With no allies left, Gerald turned to extreme tactics. In a back alley, he met a group of intimidating men, the kind who wouldn't think twice about taking on a shady job. Their cold stares mirrored the bitterness within him. Gerald outlined the plan with ruthless clarity. "Make the restaurant feel dangerous and unstable. I want people afraid to step inside. Spread whispers, create accidents, stir tension inside the dining room. I want them convinced they've got no option but to shut down." His gaze stayed steady on the men in front of him. "Leave no clues. Make it appear like a mishap, a natural incident, nothing that can be traced back to me. Be subtle, but don't let up. I want Henry, that kid, and the rest of his team spinning, fearful, unsure of who's pulling the strings." Gerald clenched his fists, his face twisted with determination. "I'm taking that place down, and they're going to feel every moment of it. This is the end for them all." That evening, Henry's restaurant became a target under a stormy sky with intermittent thunder. Rain poured as though signaling an ominous warning. Outside, hooded figures began to gather, surveying the building before slipping inside. Elijah, who had stayed late to help Henry, spotted the movement and quickly hid behind the counter, watching in tense silence. He recognized some of the intruders, men he'd seen around Gerald in recent days. So that was it. Gerald really ordered this. A chill ran down Elijah's spine as he watched them draw closer. They began their rampage, overturning furniture, shattering dishes and glasses, even ripping down curtains and scratching the walls. Elijah remained in hiding, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. Each smashed item felt like a blow, not just to the restaurant, but to everything he and Henry had worked so hard to create. "These people have no heart, no respect for anything," he whispered to himself, fighting back tears. He huddled even closer, feeling paralyzed by fear and anger. The attackers continued, splashing red paint on the walls and leaving behind a trail of wreckage. Elijah tried to stay composed, but each crash made him wince. He wanted to rush out and stop them, yet he knew it was futile. "There's nothing I can do now, but I'll tell Henry everything," he resolved, gathering courage in the midst of chaos. With each act of destruction, the devastation increased, reflecting Gerald's relentless fury. When the intruders finally disappeared, Elijah emerged, staring in shock at the wreckage. Moments later, Henry and Willie returned with supplies, only to be met by the scene of ruin. Henry froze at the entrance, eyes wide with disbelief, while Willie stood in silent horror, taking in the destruction around them. What did they do to our home, Henry?" Willie's voice trembled, barely holding together. Henry stepped forward, each stride feeling like a painful reminder as he took in the destruction around him. "They've wiped out everything," he whispered. "It's like they wanted to erase every memory we made here," he said, his voice heavy with grief. Elijah walked up to them, his face wet with tears. "I saw who did this," he choked out, struggling to keep calm. "It was those men, Gerald's men." Henry's heart broke as he looked at Elijah, the impact of the loss so clear in the young man's face. "I promised you all we'd protect this place," Henry murmured, his sadness overwhelming. "But it looks like I've let you down." The destruction horrified Beverly when she arrived at the restaurant the following morning. Refusing to let Gerald get away with it, she set to work, rallying the press and local officials to look into the case. "I won't let him walk free from this," she muttered, firing off calls and messages. With every effort, her resolve grew. "This place is more than just a restaurant. It's our story, and nobody has the right to take that away," she said, determined to get Henry and Willie all the support they needed. Over the next few days, the community rallied around them. Regulars, friends, and supporters came by, offering a helping hand and words of encouragement that rekindled hope in Henry's heart. "You're all amazing," he said tearfully. "It's like my mum's spirit lives in each of you." Inspired by a common desire to see the restaurant reopen, the community grinned and continued working. Willie discovered something unusual while helping to clear the debris, a badge with a small identifying mark that one of the intruders had left behind. He picked it up, realizing they might have just found their evidence. This could be the start of our fight back against Gerald," he thought, carefully pocketing the badge. Turning to Henry, he said with renewed hope, "This could be the proof we need to finally bring Gerald down." As everyone focused on cleaning and organizing, Henry felt a sudden, sharp pain in his chest. Henry did his best to push through, but the pain intensified, making even breathing a struggle. Willie, nearby, caught the painful look on Henry's face and hurried over. "Henry, what's going on? Are you all right?" he asked, worry evident in his tone. Henry tried to reply, but the pain was overwhelming and he collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. I need help," he managed, his voice barely a whisper. Hearing Willie's call for help, Beverly rushed over and, seeing Henry's state, quickly grabbed her phone to dial 911. "Henry, hang in there. We're here for you," she assured him, trying to keep calm, though fear was clear in her voice. Elijah approached, visibly shaken by Henry's condition. "Henry, please pull through," he murmured, clutching Henry's hand as they waited for the ambulance. It wasn't long before help arrived, whisking Henry away to the hospital. Once there, a tense silence filled the room as they waited. Henry lay in a hospital bed, his face pale, his breaths shallow. Finally, the doctor entered, and Willie, Beverly, and Elijah crowded near, their faces anxious and full of concern. After a brief pause, the doctor spoke openly. "Henry, the test results show that your condition has progressed rapidly. Unfortunately, it's advanced to a terminal stage." His words hung in the air, leaving everyone stunned. Henry shut his eyes, letting the weight of the news settle in. He opened them again, looking at Willie, Beverly, and Elijah, who were all gazing at him with disbelief and heartache. "I wanted you here to hear this," Henry began, his voice soft but steady. Even though I won't be around much longer, I need you to carry on with what we started. This restaurant, it's our home, our safe place. Promise me you'll keep it going and take care of it, he pleaded, his eyes resolute. Willie drew a deep breath, steadying himself against the hard truth. Henry, this isn't goodbye. We're here with you, and no matter what happens, the restaurant is a part of us. We'll preserve every little piece of what you and your mother built, he said, resting a comforting hand on Henry's shoulder. With misty eyes, Beverly took Henry's hand, her grip expressing the love and support she felt. You gave us a family, Henry. This bond is ours to keep, no matter what. The restaurant will stay in our hands, she promised. Henry nodded, feeling deeply thankful for such loyalty. Elijah, tears streaming down his face, stepped closer and clasped Henry's hand. You gave me everything I never had. A real home, a family. I won't let it slip away, Henry. I'll carry on the restaurant and honor you and your mother, he vowed, his voice catching. Henry's face softened, touched by their devotion. Thank you, friends. You're everything I could have dreamed of. I know the restaurant is safe with you, he said, his heart at peace, seeing their unity. A few days later, Willie and Beverly were discussing Elijah's future. After their conversation with Henry, they knew he needed an official family. Willie looked at Beverly, resolve in his gaze. Beverly, I think we need to take the next step. Elijah deserves a real family, and we can be that for him, he said, feeling the weight of the choice. Beverly, who'd been thinking the same, smiled and nodded. Yes, Willie, he's already part of us. It's time to make it official, she said, hope filling her heart. When they told Elijah, he was silent at first, taking in the words. Then a wide smile spread across his face, and he threw his arms around Willie and Beverly. Does this mean I'll have a real family? He asked, his voice thick with emotion. Willie smiled, ruffling his hair. Yes, Elijah. It means you'll never be alone again. We're your family now. Beverly hugged them both, feeling as though their family had finally come full circle in love and unity. In the hospital, Henry received the news of the adoption with a calm smile, clearly feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment. You don't know what this means to me. Knowing Elijah has a true home puts my heart at ease. You're everything this place has stood for. A family, he said, his voice soft but full of gratitude. Elijah came to the bed and took Henry's hand, understanding the significance of the moment. All of this, it's because of you, Henry. I couldn't have gotten this far without your support. I'll make you proud, he whispered, and silence settled over the room, heavy with shared emotion. Meanwhile, Gerald, who had been quietly watching Henry's situation from afar, began scheming his next move. Realizing Henry's weakened state, Gerald attempted to acquire the restaurant by working through intermediaries, masking his involvement. Using Henry's vulnerability to his advantage, he sent a stream of offers through shadow companies and agents, ensuring no one could trace his intentions back to him. This is my chance, he thought with a sly smile. With Henry out of commission, it's just a matter of time before they'll be willing to sell. As Willie and Beverly reviewed the offers, they started to detect unusual similarities. Certain details in the proposals were oddly consistent, and the negotiation style had Gerald's fingerprints all over it. Willie's expression darkened with suspicion. Beverly, these offers... something feels off. This has Gerald written all over it, he said, scanning the documents closely. Beverly's gaze sharpened with resolve. Then let's find a way to uncover what he's up to. We won't let him take what Henry poured his life into. We'll lay a trap and expose him, she added, already forming a plan. Back at the hospital, Henry decided it was time to share his recipes and culinary secrets with Elijah. Calling him over with a warm smile, Henry began. "Elijah, these recipes are a part of us. My mother created them and taught them to me with love, and now I want you to carry them forward. They're part of our family's legacy," he said, eyes glinting with pride. Elijah nodded, his heart racing with the weight of what he was being entrusted with, watching as Henry handled each ingredient as though it were precious. Henry demonstrated each step, explaining not only the methods, but the significance behind every choice and technique. This was more than just cooking. It was a legacy. "The food has to carry a bit of who you are," Henry said, his voice full of emotion. "It's not just about flavor, it's about putting your love and dedication into each dish. That's what keeps this place alive." Taking in every word, Elijah felt the importance of the legacy he was inheriting. "I promise, Henry, I'll follow everything you taught me. This restaurant will always be our home." In the end, Henry gripped Elijah's hand and spoke with conviction. "Elijah, you're the future of this place. When I'm gone, I know you'll lead the restaurant with heart." Elijah squeezed back, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "I'll preserve every recipe, Henry. I'll keep the restaurant alive. For you and for your mother," he vowed, silently promising to uphold Henry's legacy. Meanwhile, Willie and Beverly were hard at work behind the scenes, digging into Gerald's shady proposals. Through careful patience and close investigation, they uncovered documents linking Gerald directly to the middlemen behind the suspicious deals. "Willie, we've got the proof," Beverly said, her face a blend of relief and triumph. "This evidence confirms Gerald's plan to take over the restaurant for himself. Now we can finally expose him." Willie nodded, satisfied as their strategy took shape. "Gerald's about to face his reckoning. This restaurant belongs to us, and he won't ruin it," he declared. Together, they began mapping out a plan to present the evidence and bring Gerald's schemes to light. "We'll take this proof to the board and to the media. People need to see the lengths Gerald went to in trying to tear down Henry's legacy," Beverly said with determination. Willie agreed, mentally rehearsing their next moves. If he thought he'd win, he's sorely mistaken. "We're making sure justice is done," he responded, resolute in his mission to protect Henry's vision. Later that night, Gerald pored over his own documents, suddenly realizing he'd been outmaneuvered. Someone had revealed his plot, and the evidence was about to go public. "How dare they try to fool me? Do they really believe they can beat me?" he muttered, fury dripping from every word. Though trapped, Gerald's greed pushed him not to surrender. "If they think I'm defeated, they're wrong. I have one last card to play," he resolved, his gaze fierce, willing to go to any lengths. In a desperate move, Gerald orchestrated a final scheme. He planned to destroy the restaurant physically, dismantling the foundation of everything Henry, Willie, and Beverly had worked for. He contacted people who'd do anything for the right price and instructed them to stage an accident. "Make it look like a mishap, with no clues left behind. They'll be forced to shut down," he commanded, his expression filled with spite. He went to extremes out of his own, insatiable greed, disregarding the consequences of his actions. Meanwhile, as Willie and Beverly were preparing the restaurant for the next day, they sensed something was wrong. Willie heard a suspicious sound coming from the back and went to investigate, finding signs of possible sabotage. "Beverly, someone's been here. They tried to set something up," he said, visibly troubled. Beverly approached, observing the damage, and felt a surge of both anger and resolve. "Gerald is trying to take us down, but we're not going to let him succeed," she replied, already thinking of a plan to counter his tactics. The next morning, as they were repairing the damage, a police officer arrived at the restaurant. The sabotage had been documented and sent for analysis. "It's time we faced Gerald directly," Willie declared, resolute. "He's gone too far, and now we have enough evidence to hold him accountable." Beverly nodded, a mix of relief and determination on her face. "This has to end, Willie. For Henry, for Elijah, and for everything we've built together," she affirmed, her voice firm. On the day of the formal complaint, Willie and Beverly gathered all their evidence and went to the police station. They were ready to end Gerald's manipulations for good. Meeting with the investigator, they detailed the scheme, from Gerald's shady offers to his attempts at vandalism. "We've gathered enough to prove Gerald's behind this. He not only tried to buy the restaurant through deceit, but attempted to damage it physically as well," Beverly said, her confidence unwavering. As they presented the evidence, Gerald was summoned to give his side of the story. He arrived, trying to stay composed, but his eyes betrayed his anxiety and frustration. "This is all a setup. You have nothing on me," he protested, attempting to defend himself, but the evidence spoke for itself, trapping Gerald in the web he'd spun. Willie looked him straight in the eye, allowing his disappointment and anger to show. "Gerald, you've been playing dirty from the start, but your greed has finally turned against you. With hours of testimony and evidence laid out, justice ultimately won." Gerald, now without defenses or allies, was officially taken into custody. As Willie and Beverly watched the final chapter close on that dark ordeal, Beverly felt a sense of relief washing over her. At last, Henry can finally find the peace he deserves, and we can all start anew, she said, the weight of years visibly lifting from her shoulders. Willie agreed, his eyes following as Gerald was escorted away by the police. "This restaurant will keep going, no matter what. We did this for Henry, for Elijah, and for ourselves," he added, feeling that the restaurant's future was secure at last. Henry had finally returned to his beloved place. When he stepped through the door, he was awestruck. The dining room had a new vibrancy. Lively tables filled with cheerful patrons, warm laughter filling the space, and the familiar, comforting aroma of the recipes he and his mother had once crafted together. He paused in the doorway, taking it all in, a sense of fulfillment settling over him. "This is beyond anything I'd hoped for," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "Seeing this place like this, it's like bringing my mother's memory back to life." Willie, noticing Henry, came over with a smile, clearly moved by the impact of their collective journey. "Henry, none of this would have been possible without you. Your resilience and dedication built this place up, and I promise we'll keep the spirit of it alive," Willie said, his voice filled with gratitude. Henry, visibly touched, placed a hand on Willie's shoulder. "You're like a son to me, Willie. Knowing the restaurant is in your care gives me peace." "Thank you for being loyal and true," he replied, his voice unsteady with emotion. Elijah then approached, clearly emotional to see Henry back. "Henry, I'm carrying forward everything you taught me, the recipes, the stories, all of it. I want you to know I'll uphold it all with honor," he said, with a look of determination. Henry's face broke into a proud smile as he pulled Elijah into an embrace. "You're something special, Elijah. You've breathed new life into this place, and I know it's safe in your hands. Always remember who you are and what you mean to us all," he whispered, feeling the bond between them. Finally, Beverly, who had been watching with misty eyes, approached, sensing it was the right moment to share her own gratitude. "Henry, I want you to know you've given us a real home and a family," Beverly said warmly, her hand resting on his with a soft sincerity that Henry felt deeply. "Beverly, you're the one who keeps us all together," he replied, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for being the light here, and for always having faith in us." He felt, in the moment, like his purpose had been fulfilled. Days later, they closed the restaurant for a special gathering. Willie and Beverly, surrounded by friends and the supportive community, were about to officially adopt Elijah. Henry, standing by to witness this moment, watched with a heart brimming with pride and happiness. "This is the future I always wanted for you all," he thought, finally feeling that everything had come full circle. Though the ceremony was brief, every word carried the weight of a new beginning. Elijah, now formally a part of the family, beamed with joy in his eyes. Looking up at Willie and Beverly, he whispered, "So, am I really part of the family now?" His voice trembled a bit. Willie chuckled, resting a hand on Elijah's shoulder. "Yes, Elijah, you've got a family, a home, and a future. Nothing can break that now," he said warmly. Elijah hugged them both tightly, reassured that he was never going to be alone again. After the ceremony, they returned to the restaurant for a spirited celebration. Friends, neighbors, and longtime patrons filled the dining area, bringing the place to life like never before. Watching it all unfold, Henry felt a deep peace settle within him. "This is the legacy I want to leave. A home, a place of love and friendship for everyone," he thought, smiling softly as he watched the joyful crowd. Every laugh, every embrace, and every kind word between friends and family made the restaurant feel even more special. Later that evening, Henry called everyone together for a private talk. Though he knew his time was limited, he had important things to share. "I have plans for the restaurant's future, and I want you all to know what's ahead," he said, his voice calm, but with a hint of urgency. Willie, Beverly, and Elijah listened intently, sensing the significance of this moment. Henry explained that he had left behind detailed instructions and documents to ensure the restaurant's legacy would live on. Each recipe, each secret, and each plan was recorded carefully, like a roadmap for them to follow. "This place is yours now," he said warmly. "I want you to look after it like it's part of who you are. This restaurant isn't just a business. It's a shared story, a bond between us." The weight of his words resonated, filling the three of them with a profound sense of honor and gratitude for the trust he had given them. As their conversation wound down, Henry made one final promise to Elijah. Holding the young man's hand and meeting his gaze, he said, "Elijah, you're the future of this place. I'll be with you always, even if you can't see me. Let your heart guide you and treat this place as your home, because that's exactly what it is now." Elijah nodded, feeling a surge of responsibility and appreciation swelling within him. "I promise, Henry. I'll care for it all. And you'll always be here with us," Elijah replied, his voice thick with emotion. Later that evening, Henry watched each of them, Elijah, Willie, and Beverly, interacting with friends and customers. Seeing his legacy in action, he felt a peace he'd longed for, reassured that his dream was now entrusted to those he loved. "They're going to carry on what I started," he thought to himself, his heart finally able to relax as he saw his future secured. Over the next few days, the restaurant continued to thrive, with the trio weaving Henry's passion into every detail. The community rallied around them, recognizing and appreciating their dedication and hard work. Though Henry's health declined, he visited whenever he could, pride swelling in his heart with each glimpse of the life he had built. In his final days, the hospital room was a constant scene of visitors and laughter. Willie, Beverly, and Elijah took turns by his bedside, filling each moment with love and memories. Though frail, Henry's spirit remained bright, laughing at their stories and marveling at the deep connection they'd nurtured. "You three are my real family. I'm proud of each of you," he said, his voice unsteady but a soft smile never leaving his face. Holding his hand, Beverly reminisced, Remember when we first started working together? We didn't have much, but you always said love for the work was what mattered most." Henry nodded, eyes gleaming with the memory. "Beverly, you're exactly right." He responded in a warm and appreciative manner. "People fill a home with life, not walls. Each one of you brought something truly unique to this restaurant." Standing next to Henry, Willie felt a deeper sense of responsibility as those words sank in. "Henry, I promise I'll keep this place just as you and your mum envisioned it. I'll carry on everything you both poured into it with such love and dedication," he said, his voice full of emotion. The loyalty in Willie's eyes made Henry smile, which was obvious. "I know you will," my friend replied calmly. "I couldn't have found a better person to care for our home." Elijah, sensing the importance of the moment, walked up to Henry, hugging him tightly and gripping his hands. "Henry, I'll honor every lesson you've shared. I'll cook just like you, care for this place as you always have," he promised, determination lighting up his gaze. Henry nodded with a proud smile. "Elijah, you're like a son to me. I know the restaurant will thrive in your hands, and you'll make it shine even brighter," he replied, letting the warmth of his emotions show. On a peaceful afternoon, Henry felt the urge to share one last story about his mother, a cherished memory. Taking a deep breath, he began, "I remember the first dish she taught me. She always said food carried a piece of the cook's soul, that each spice and ingredient was a way of showing love." His eyes softened, lost in the memory. Willie, Beverly, and Elijah listened closely, cherishing every word as if it were a precious gift. "It was from her I learned the importance of love in all we do, and I hope that lesson stays with you all," he finished with a gentle smile. While Henry was resting in the hospital, Elijah took over the kitchen for the first time, determined to bring Henry's teachings to life. He prepared each dish, just as Henry had shown him, feeling as though Henry were right beside him with every step. Once finished, he served Willie and Beverly, who tasted in quiet reverence, savoring every flavor. "Elijah, you've truly grasped everything Henry taught," Willie said, his eyes brimming with emotion. As the diners tasted the food, they too felt moved, sensing Henry's spirit in every bite. Beverly gazed at Elijah with admiration, taking in the way he poured his heart into every little detail. "You're keeping Henry's spirit alive, Elijah. He always knew you'd carry on his legacy in the best way," she said, her smile laced with emotion. Elijah returned her smile, feeling both the weight of responsibility and a deep sense of gratitude for everything Henry had shared with him. Yet, just as everyone celebrated Elijah's success, troubling news arrived at the restaurant. Henry's health had taken a turn, and the doctors cautioned that his time was running short. Hearing this, Willie felt a pang in his chest, but he steeled himself, determined to be a source of strength for the others. "He gave us so much," Willie said firmly. "Now, it's our turn to be by his side until the end." Elijah, though heartbroken, knew he had to stay strong to honor Henry's legacy. Days later, alongside Willie, Elijah found himself at Henry's bedside, where Henry called them close for a final talk about the restaurant. With visible effort, he handed them an envelope, explaining it contained the transfer papers for the business. "This place is yours now," he said, his voice frail but resolute. "You both have cared for it with such dedication, and I trust you'll keep doing so." Willie took the envelope, feeling the profound responsibility and love that came with it. Henry looked at Elijah, taking his hand with warmth, and offered him one last piece of wisdom. "Elijah, never lose sight of who you are or what you've learned. This restaurant is your home now, and every dish you serve will reflect a part of you," he added with a soft, peaceful smile. Moved, Elijah promised he would carry on Henry's legacy with care. "I'll look after everything, Henry. You'll always be here, woven into every part of this place." Henry then turned to Willie and Beverly, feeling at ease as he saw the family they had become. "You two have been my rock. Take care of each other, and of Elijah. You have something rare, and I know you'll keep my vision alive," he said, his smile calm and content. Willie nodded, understanding the depth of Henry's trust. "Thank you for everything, Henry. You'll always be with us, no matter where you are," he replied, holding Henry's hand with strength. With a peaceful heart, Henry closed his eyes, surrounded by the love he had fostered. He knew he had prepared everything for his legacy to live on. In the company of those who loved him and would carry out his dreams, he found peace with his final breath. When Henry's funeral day came, the restaurant stayed closed to honor his memory. The news of his passing spread through town, and friends, family, and customers gathered to pay their respects. At the front, Willie, Beverly, and Elijah stood shoulder to shoulder, feeling the weight of losing not only a friend and mentor, but a father figure. Willie clutched a small photo of Henry with his mother, acutely aware of the responsibilities now on his shoulders. "He's gone, but his strength lives within each of us," he murmured, glancing at Beverly, who nodded, struggling to keep her emotions in check. For Beverly, who had always looked to Henry as a guiding light, life suddenly felt emptier. She scanned the crowd, thinking of the countless lives he had touched with his kindness. Henry wasn't just the owner of a restaurant. He was the soul of this community, she said, her voice wavering. Beside her, Elijah held a small note Henry had given him in his last days, detailing his hopes for the restaurant. "He entrusted all of this to us. He believed in our strength," Elijah whispered, trying to stay composed. After the service, the three returned to the quiet restaurant, each feeling the weight of Henry's absence. Willie took in the familiar space, realizing the responsibility that was now his. "This place is Henry's legacy, and it's on us to honor everything he built," he said, his voice resolute despite the sadness in his eyes. Beverly nodded, her expression serious but filled with determination. "We have to keep his spirit alive here. This is our home now, and we'll make it everything Henry envisioned," she replied. Elijah held Henry's last letter, carefully unfolding it to read the heartfelt message. "Elijah, the future of the restaurant is in your hands. Remember all you've learned and the love we put into every dish. You're the continuation of our story." He looked at Willie and Beverly, his heart heavy, but resolved to honor Henry's words. "I'll honor this promise no matter what," he said softly, tucking the letter away. In the days that followed, they prepared the restaurant for reopening, pouring love and care into every detail, just as Henry had taught them. Willie, now leading the kitchen as chef and owner, felt both the pressure and a deep gratitude for inheriting this responsibility from Henry. "This isn't just a job, it's carrying on the legacy of someone who transformed our lives," he said, determined to give it everything he had. Beverly and Elijah exchanged a supportive glance, sharing the weight of the commitment. Beverly, who had always been Henry's right hand, had helped shape the restaurant's heartbeat, from managing the kitchen's rhythm to overseeing service. She observed Elijah, who had taken up Henry's recipes with devotion, seeing traces of Henry's spirit in every dish he crafted. "Henry would be so proud of you, Elijah. Your dedication and passion reflect that you truly understand what this place is about," she said, gently touching his shoulder. Elijah smiled, feeling both the honor and responsibility of his role. The reopening day finally came, with the restaurant buzzing, filled with loyal customers, many there to honor Henry's memory. Willie took charge of the kitchen and made a determined effort to prepare each dish exactly as Henry had shown him. "It's our first night without him, but he's here in every detail," he thought, pouring his heart into every plate. Elijah, working beside Willie, felt each movement was a tribute to Henry. Serving a familiar customer, he saw the emotion in her face and knew he was keeping his promise. This was made the way Henry would have. With love, he murmured, observing her reaction. Beverly, assisting in the dining room, took it all in with a proud smile, grateful for the team Henry had nurtured. At the end of the evening, the restaurant fell quiet, wrapped in a peaceful atmosphere. Willie, Beverly, and Elijah sat together, letting the silence say more than words. "We did it, guys. Henry would be proud to see what we've achieved together," Willie remarked, his eyes distant with memories. Beverly nodded, her smile soft. "He taught us the meaning of family, and that's what we'll keep building here," she added, sensing Henry's influence still guiding them. Yet despite Henry's passing and the success of the reopening, the restaurant wasn't entirely out of danger. Some of Gerald's former associates, bitter about his downfall, continued to stir trouble, spreading rumors about the restaurant's safety and quality, clearly aimed at scaring away customers and eroding the community's trust. When Willie found out, he quickly brought Beverly and Elijah together for a serious conversation. "They're trying to intimidate us, make us feel isolated," he said, his voice steady and his gaze determined. "But we know the truth. This restaurant stands stronger than any falsehood." Beverly, always vigilant, was already aware of the rumors going around and had taken steps to secure the place. "We're ready to handle this. We know our strength, and so does the community," she added, doing her best to keep everyone's spirits high. Young as he was, Elijah understood the weight of the moment and the need to protect what Henry had built. Henry never backed down in hard times. He taught us to stand up and fight, and that's exactly what we'll do, he said, his eyes full of determination. In the days that followed, the rumors continued, but the community began to rally. Loyal customers and Henry's old friends gathered to support the restaurant, sharing heartfelt reviews and stories online. Soon, social media was filled with words of gratitude and admiration for the place, drowning out any negative gossip. "It's like every positive message is a shield against these attacks," Beverly observed, watching the flood of support pour in. Willie nodded, feeling like Henry was still watching over them. "This is what real community looks like, Beverly. Right here with us." When Willie arrived at the restaurant one morning, he discovered a sign that some of their customers had left hanging by the entrance. It had a simple but powerful message. "This restaurant is our home." Beverly and Elijah were both moved by the gesture, so he brought it inside to show them. "Henry would be so proud to see how much this place means to people," Willie said, visibly touched. Elijah smiled, realizing that every trial only made what they'd built together stronger. With the community's support firmly in place and the restaurant's reputation unshaken, Willie and Beverly could finally feel a sense of peace. Watching the bond between Willie and Beverly, Elijah decided it was time to do something meaningful. He secretly planned a small ceremony at the restaurant to celebrate their union. Henry would have loved to see this day, he thought, carefully planning every detail. On the night of the ceremony, the restaurant was closed, and the space was decorated with simple flowers and candles, creating a warm, inviting setting. Elijah's surprise and the group of friends that had gathered around them welcomed Willie and Beverly when they entered. "Elijah, this whole thing was your idea?" Willie asked, his voice filled with both surprise and gratitude. Elijah gave a small, shy smile and nodded. "I wanted you to feel just how much you mean to all of us. Henry always believed in the power of family, and that's what we've become," he explained. The ceremony was short, but the emotions were intense, each word resonating with the promises and memories Henry had left behind. When Beverly spoke her vows, she gazed at Willie with warmth. "Finding you felt like finding home. I vow to cherish and protect this place and all of us, Just as Henry would have, she said, her voice wavering. Willie smiled back, holding her hand gently. Beverly, you've brought such light into my life. Together, we'll keep Henry's dream alive, for him and for us all, he replied, his eyes misting over. After the ceremony, Elijah offered a heartfelt toast in Henry's honor. He raised his glass, looking each person in the eye, his voice breaking slightly. To Henry, who showed us that real family is built on love and commitment. May his spirit stay with us in every meal, every smile, and every memory we create together. The room buzzed with emotion as everyone raised their glasses, each one sensing Henry's presence with them. The celebration continued in a lively, joyful atmosphere as guests shared memories of Henry, his generosity, his resilience, and the way he brought them together. Beverly and Willie took their first dance as husband and wife, filling the space with a warmth that seemed to wrap around everyone present. Watching them, Elijah felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing he had made this moment possible, and he could almost feel Henry there, smiling with the rest of them. Willie, Beverly, and Elijah bid their friends farewell as the evening came to an end, and then stood together in the empty restaurant amid a soothing calm. Willie looked at Beverly and Elijah, and the silence between them was rich with understanding and unity. Henry always believed in this place and in the family we've built. He'd be proud of what we shared today, Willie said, a soft smile on his face. Beverly nodded, squeezing his hand. We did this together, and together we'll keep going. This is Henry's true legacy. In the days that followed, the restaurant thrived as never before. Each dish served, and every customer's smile was a testament to Henry's enduring dream. A journalist came by to interview Willie, who shared a heartfelt account of their journey, the hard days, the hurdles, and the progress they'd made together. He spoke about Henry's lasting lessons, about resilience, about valuing people and putting one's soul into every meal. Every plate we prepare carries a story of love and respect for Henry and his mum, he shared, his words filled with emotion. The journalist could see the authenticity in his gaze, realizing this restaurant was more than just a business. It was a real home for everyone who walked through its doors. She noticed Elijah working in the kitchen and requested to watch him as he prepared one of Henry's most cherished recipes. It's like he's right here with me, guiding my every move, Elijah said, gently stirring the ingredients with a blend of care and precision that revealed his deep affection. The journalist moved closer, admiring his dedication. He left a piece of himself here, didn't he? This place is more than a restaurant, she commented, touched by the bond between Elijah and Henry. As they filmed, the camera captured genuine moments between Willie, Beverly, and Elijah, showing how they had become like family. At the end of the day, the journalist requested a final shot. Elijah, Willie, and Beverly stood together in front of the restaurant, Henry's apron draped over Elijah. This is the true heart of this place, she remarked emotionally. Elijah, wearing the apron, smiled and softly said, He's always with us, in every detail. A few days later, the broadcast aired, stirring emotions throughout the city. The restaurant was now more than a spot to grab a meal. It had become a symbol of resilience, unity, and love. Every customer who entered knew Henry's story, and as they tasted the food, they felt a connection to him. It feels like he's still here, like every dish carries a piece of his presence, a loyal customer said. Beverly overheard and smiled, feeling they'd fulfilled Henry's dream of keeping his memory alive in every detail. 5 years went by, and the restaurant continued to flourish. Willie and Beverly, with Elijah's help, poured their hearts into preserving its essence, balancing tradition with new ideas. News of the restaurant's impact on the community spread, drawing customers from all over the city, but the core purpose of what they'd built remained unchanged. The restaurant, above all, felt like a family home. Willie, watching the lively energy in the dining area, felt a deep sense of pride. "We're honoring Henry in every single detail," he thought, seeing his friend's dream continue to flourish. Beverly, now expertly managing the team with confidence, often found herself reflecting on her journey. Since joining the restaurant, it had become more than just a job. It was a home, a place where she felt connected and valued. "I've learned what it truly means to build something meaningful alongside people who matter," she whispered to herself. The chairs, neatly arranged around the tables, stood ready to welcome new faces and stories. Over time, Beverly had become the heart of the dining room, always there with a warm smile and a kind word for every guest. Elijah, now a teenager, worked alongside Willie in the kitchen, feeling at ease with every recipe and each step. "It feels like just yesterday that Henry was showing me how to chop the ingredients," he remarked with a grin as he prepared a dish. Willie looked at him, seeing the responsible young man Elijah had grown into. "Henry always saw the chef in you, Elijah. From the start, he noticed your love for the kitchen," Willie responded, proud of Elijah's progress. Willie thought back to the hurdles they had overcome and realized how much he himself had changed. He remembered the early days when they struggled to keep the restaurant open and how Henry's encouragement helped him push through. "This place taught me resilience, taught me not to give up," he reflected, scanning the kitchen, now his domain. For him, the restaurant was an extension of his soul, a living tribute to Henry's memory. As time went on, the restaurant's reputation grew, drawing visitors from all over the city, eager to experience Henry's legacy. Elijah was determined to keep learning, soaking up Willie's knowledge and fine-tuning his skills. "I know Henry would be proud to see what we've done with this place, how we keep his spirit alive," he said, watching the activity in the dining room. Beverly overheard and nodded. "Each of us carries a part of Henry," she agreed. "That's what makes this restaurant special." One day, an unexpected letter arrived from the city council, announcing that the restaurant would be recognized as a cultural heritage site. The announcement brought tears to everyone's eyes as it celebrated how much this place meant to the entire community. This was Henry's dream coming true, a vision he left behind, and today, this place truly belongs to everyone in town. Willie, holding the letter with hands shaking from emotion, spoke to the crowd. The celebration was hosted at the restaurant, with the dining room packed with friends, family, and loyal customers, all gathered to honor Henry's memory and legacy. Beverly, visibly moved, shared her thoughts on how the restaurant had changed her life and impacted countless others. "This place taught us unity, love, and resilience. It's a testament to what we can achieve when we believe in a dream," she said, with an emotional smile, looking around at the supportive faces that had stood by the restaurant over the years. Willie also took a moment to reflect on Henry's influence. He entrusted us with a mission, and today we're fulfilling part of it. But the journey isn't over. It's up to us to keep Henry's spirit alive in every corner of this place. His words, filled with gratitude and respect, earned applause from the crowd, strengthening his connection to Henry's memory. Among the audience, Elijah, watching with a mix of joy and nostalgia, decided to honor Henry in his own way. Putting on his apron, Elijah climbed onto the makeshift stage, his voice trembling with emotion as he expressed his gratitude. "Henry showed me the way and gave me a home when I had nowhere else to go. He was more than a mentor, he was like a father. Everything I do now is to honor what he taught me," he said with tears welling up, his words moving everyone in the room. The sense of family that Henry fostered remained alive, present in every detail, in every dish, and on the faces of every customer. Beverly, who now managed the restaurant's events and administration, looked over the bustling dining room with a content smile. "We've kept his spirit alive, Willie. We preserved everything Henry created with such love," she noted. Willie, recalling the challenges they'd overcome, nodded, feeling that every trial had only strengthened them. "Henry believed in the power of unity, and that's why we're here today," he replied proudly. Now 17, Elijah had stepped into the role of head chef, but Henry's apron remained a cherished part of his daily routine. He cherished it as a precious keepsake, wearing it at special moments to remind himself of his humble beginnings. "Every dish I make is a tribute to him," he would say to Willie, while sampling ingredients for a new recipe. Elijah was starting to craft his own unique combinations, drawing inspiration from Henry's methods, but adding his own flair to each creation. "I'm ready to carve my own path, but he'll always be there in every detail," he said. The restaurant had recently undergone renovations, keeping the core structure and spirit, but updating it with modern touches to create a warmer, more inviting space. The decor blended classic and contemporary elements, carefully preserving items that were meaningful to Henry's legacy. In the far right corner of the dining room, the old piano Henry used to play on celebratory nights still stood, restored yet holding on to its sentimental charm. "This place holds every memory Henry left behind," thought Willie, watching the guests enjoy the atmosphere. Near the entrance, a wall was dedicated to photographs capturing special moments, snapshots of Henry, Willie, Beverly, and Elijah over the years. Each photograph captured moments of joy and challenges they had faced together. Beverly had arranged them in a timeline, every image adding to the story they had woven together. "These memories are what define us," she would say, brushing her fingers over the photos. Elijah, standing beside her, smiled and said, "It's like a gallery of love and resilience, feeling connected to each image." In the heart of the dining room, a special photo of Henry held a place of honor. He was smiling, proudly holding a plate, his expression showing the deep love he put into his work. This photo had become the restaurant's symbol, a reminder of the man who started it all. Every time Willie looked at that photo, he felt as though Henry was right beside him, guiding every decision he made. "You're with us, Henry." In every laugh, every story, and every recipe, he thought, grateful for all he had learned from his friend. Beverly, who often oversaw the dining area, noticed how guests reacted to the ambience. Many paused to admire the photos and read the little stories next to them. "They can feel Henry's presence here," she told Willie, touched by how deeply the restaurant affected each visitor. Willie smiled, knowing Henry had created something remarkable. "This is his true legacy," he replied, turning each visitor into a friend and every dish into a memory, his eyes bright with pride. As Elijah continued Henry's recipes, he also started to develop his own flair in the kitchen. Having learned the basics from Willie and Henry, he now felt it was time to add his personal touch, blending everything he had absorbed over the years. "I want Henry to look down and feel proud of what I'm doing here," he remarked as he tasted a new blend of flavors. Watching him, Willie couldn't help but feel pride swell in his chest. "Henry always said you'd bring something fresh to this place, Elijah. Today, I see he was right." The restaurant remained a beloved spot in the community, becoming a backdrop for many of life's celebrations. Families, couples, and friends gathered there, drawn to the warmth that filled the space. Every laugh and every shared embrace reminded Beverly of Henry's words about the meaning of home. She whispered, moved by the tales that place had witnessed. He didn't just build a restaurant, he created a haven for all of us. In time, the restaurant was officially named a cultural landmark, news that brought immense joy to Willie, Beverly, and Elijah. They saw it as a tribute to Henry's dream. When the day of the ceremony arrived, the room was overflowing with people, and the three were invited on stage to accept the commemorative plaque. With emotion thick in his voice, Willie took the microphone and shared, "This restaurant belongs to everyone who believes in the power of community. Henry gave us a dream, and it's real today because of each one of you. Standing with Willie and Beverly, Elijah took his turn, adding one last tribute to Henry. He gave me family, a home, and a reason to hope for the future. Everything I do here is to honor what he taught me. Henry's spirit lives on in every smile and every dish we serve, he said, his voice breaking as he teared up. The crowd, visibly moved, broke into applause, feeling that Henry's story was a piece of their own. After the ceremony, the community gathered at the restaurant entrance, where the heritage plaque was placed beside Henry's photo. In a moment of quiet, they stood reflecting on the legacy this man had left behind. Holding Willie's hand, Beverly murmured, "This is his legacy, and we'll continue to honor it every single day." Willie nodded, feeling that he had finally accomplished everything Henry had once aspired to. On a memorable day, Elijah clearly recalled a moment in the kitchen when Henry invited him for a chat as they prepared a meal together. Henry was showing him a new recipe, and seeing how focused Elijah was, he shifted to a more serious tone. "Elijah," he said, slicing the vegetables carefully, "cooking isn't just about following instructions. It's about understanding and connecting with each person who's going to eat your food." Elijah glanced up, a bit puzzled, and Henry continued, "When you make a meal, think about the person who's going to have it. They might be feeling down, or maybe they've had a rough day. Each dish you serve is a chance to show them that someone cares." Henry paused, meeting Elijah's gaze with a look of warmth. "Food is a form of empathy," he said. "When you cook, you're putting a little piece of your heart into it to make the other person feel seen." "Curious?" Elijah asked. "But how do I do that, Henry? How do I add empathy to the food?" Smiling, Henry handed him a sprig of fresh herbs, guiding him to add it with care. "By thinking about who you're cooking for and putting thought into each ingredient, you're already showing empathy," Henry said, helping Elijah understand. "It's not something you find in a recipe book. It's something you feel, and people sense it, even in silence." This lesson stayed with Elijah. Elijah often remembered Henry's words about how important it is to connect with others, even without saying anything. And whenever someone asked about Henry's photo by the restaurant entrance, Elijah would smile, his eyes lighting up like his mentor's, and start telling the story of the man who taught him to infuse empathy into every dish. From that day forward, whenever a new customer admired Henry's photo at the entrance, Elijah would proudly say, "This restaurant was built by Henry, a man who believed that love and care make a home. He taught us that food is a way to show people they're loved and looked after." Watching customers' reactions, it was clear they were touched each time they heard about Henry's life and the impact he left. Customers would lean in, listening to Elijah's every word, as if Henry's spirit flowed through each story. Every recipe served here has Henry's touch, either crafted by him or inspired by his ideas. But Henry was more than just a chef. He was a mentor, a friend, and a father figure to many. Elijah often grew emotional, sharing memories of him. The restaurant had become more than a place to eat. It was a living memory of Henry, a haven where his presence was felt in every corner. He taught us to care for this place as we care for one another, Elijah would say, ending with a smile. After sharing his story, Elijah would step into the kitchen, showing new staff Henry's recipes, patiently passing down each technique and tip his mentor had shared with him. "The secret isn't only in the ingredients," he'd say, adjusting Henry's apron around his waist. "It's in the care you put into choosing them and the love you add to every dish." The young chefs listened closely, absorbing every detail, realizing they were part of something bigger. Watching this, Willie and Beverly saw Elijah as a reflection of Henry, carrying forward his dedication and respect for the craft. Willie, who had learned the importance of guiding and caring for others, felt a deep sense of pride seeing Elijah step into this role. He's found his way carrying Henry's legacy with honor, Willie would think. His heart warmed as Beverly squeezed his hand beside him with a smile. Elijah is our continuation, Willie. He's proof that everything Henry taught us will live on, Beverly would say. The community kept coming back, and the restaurant became a symbol of resilience and unity. Familiar faces always greeted Willie and Beverly warmly, as if they were all part of one large family. This place holds our story, and these people's support reminds us we did things right, Beverly would say, looking around with a sense of contentment. Willie nodded, feeling Henry's legacy was truly the greatest inheritance he left them. Henry always believed in the strength of a close-knit community. He'd be proud to see this. As Elijah grew, he also learned the true value of family and the meaning of home. With each dish he prepared, Elijah could almost feel Henry right there beside him, guiding his hands and sharing quiet encouragement. "I never imagined I'd find a place that made me feel so whole," he whispered as he mixed ingredients, feeling Henry's presence in every task. He knew Henry's influence touched everything he did, and he felt forever grateful for this chance to carry on his mentor's legacy. The days brought fresh challenges, but also rewarding accomplishments and joyful moments. When the restaurant's anniversary rolled around, they decided to throw a special celebration, inviting everyone who had been part of its journey. Elijah took charge of the decor, carefully ensuring everything was as Henry would have wanted: simple, warm, and full of love. Henry always said it wasn't about the fancy stuff, it's the love you pour into every little detail, Elijah shared, adjusting the flowers on each table. Willie and Beverly watched him, proud of how far he'd come. During the event, everyone shared memories and stories of Henry, and the space filled with laughter, smiles, and heartfelt emotions. As Elijah looked around at the crowd gathered in Henry's honor, he knew they had honored their promise from years ago. He's here, in each of us, in every shared memory. And that's the greatest testament to his enduring legacy, Elijah reflected as he absorbed the happiness around him. Later, when the restaurant had quieted, Elijah stepped outside and looked up at the sky. Remembering all the love and lessons Henry had gifted him, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. "Thank you, Henry, for giving me both a family and a purpose," he murmured with a smile, filled with a gentle mix of longing and appreciation. Elijah knew that wherever Henry was, he'd be smiling, proud of the journey they had all taken together. If this story moved you, click like to show your support. Your encouragement allows us to continue sharing inspiring content. Keep an eye out for the next story. We can't wait to bring it to you. Thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you in the next video.